the Countryside Podcasts with Chris Skinner.
Very breezy day for the season. Here we are, well into August now, and there's blue skies here on High Ash Farm. It's a fine morning, but that wind, Chris, has been unexpected.
You're telling me, Matthew, yesterday we had a gale just briefly pass through the farm and some heavy rain, another 5 millimetres of rain, which was warmly welcome. And that's passed us by. Fortunately, no tree damage. But if we get time later on in this podcast, we might look at some of the mature oak trees and other trees on High Ash Farm. And I've brought us to the edge of one of the fields on High Ash Farm. It's called Dirty Close. We've been to a further part on it a few weeks ago where the teasel maze is and still is up and running. Only one child has lost its mum in there, but they did get reunited, but there was some screaming and crying going on. The mum who was walking her 3 children through the maze said, "No, you have to stay with me. Mr. Skinner says you can get lost." And one of the children ran off ahead. It was a young lad, I think he was 6, and he lost sight of his mum and couldn't get back, so it's really quite funny, but it's great entertainment for mums because the children run a huge distance. Now, on the edge of Dirty Close, where we're standing, are a row of trees, and they're rather special ones for me because they're called mountain ash. And obviously we've got High Ash Farm here, and this particular tree, which is called the Rowan tree, its common name, isn't related to our ash trees whatsoever. So why is it called an ash, a mountain ash? So what I've done, I've brought an ash leaf with us, and it's got 8 leaflets on. It's called a pinnate leaf, and it finishes with a single lance-shaped leaf, and it's quite a big leaf. Look, it's nearly a foot long, and that's the common ash, Fraxinus excelsior, and this in front of us is the mountain ash.
Quite different.
Exactly.
But there's one thing that strikes me straight away, the colour.
Oh yes, the colour's fantastic. But I'll just pull one of the leaves off. There we go, like that. And put it beside our ash leaf, and you can see that the leaves are similar. It's got a pinnate leaf. The ash tree here, the common ash that grows all over High Ash Farm's got 8 or 9 leaflets on. There's always an odd number because it finishes with a single one, and so does the mountain ash. Sorbus acuparia is the scientific name, and it also finishes with that single leaf. So that's why they're called pinnate leaves. It's a leaf with lots of leaflets on it. And in the spring, we've driven past this several times. There's big, fat, flat umbellifer-like flowers, although it's a sorbus feature, that you have these big, round, creamy white flowers that's attractive to bees, moths, and so it gets pollinated. And then later in the season, these berries appear. They start off as tiny little green berries and gradually develop, and the whole tree is laden with literally thousands of these berries, and it's a huge favourite with many of our thrush species. And I've already seen my first field fair, and the first 2 trees behind us, there's a row of about 20 trees right by Caister Lane, which runs through the middle of the farm, which is why we can hear the traffic going past us. The first 2 trees have been stripped bare, and there's also some missel thrush feeding on these, and the missel thrush and the field fair don't really see eye to eye, so there's a few squabbles going on. There's some electric cables right across the top of us, but this tree is quite suitable to plant underneath those cables because it's seldom, which is why it's popular in towns and cities and parks and in woodland as well, it never makes huge tree status like the common ash. So it's a kind of native of our country, and it particularly grows up in the northern half of the UK. That's its best habitat up there, and you'll see it often outside farmsteads, a lot in the sort of mountainous regions, and if it's high up, it'll grow up as high as about 3,000 feet up the mountainsides, and then after that you don't really see it. But at that height it's often stunted, but it still produces the berries.
Very vivid berries, and they look very attractive on these trees at this time of year, don't they?
Yes, yeah, and that's the whole point of it. It's,
oranges and reds.
Yes, you can actually buy Rowan trees that have had their berries kind of adapted and bred so that they're almost pure white, and but there's also different coloured berries. So this is a traditional one, and it's a tree, we think it comes from the Norwegian name of runa, which means charm, and often rowans were planted outside small holdings and crofts up in Scotland, and it helped to keep the witches away. And often a branch was hung over the cattle buildings right at the entrance where the cattle goes in and out, to help prevent them and protect them from getting various diseases. So a lot of history attached to it, but it's really good early berries. Some of them mature later in the year, which we'll visit in a little while, one called blackthorn. We'll visit that shortly. But this is one of the first ones, and although it's normally I wouldn't bring you here until the end of the month and into September, but everything this year, because of the mild spring, the very warm weather, has made nature go on a pace, if you like. It's really early, so it's a month earlier than normal. And it's really unusual to see field fairs in the UK in mid-August, but we certainly have them here. And already, as I said, the missel thrushes are eating them, so they'll peck the berries, and the berries then have a seed in there. If I take one of them off, there we go, just take one, they're still quite soft already, actually, and if I break it in half, we'll see there's a seed in there. Here it comes out on my fingernail.
Orange flesh in there.
There's orange flesh inside the berry,
and
that's the seed, and it is very, very hard. Now, this tree has a particular relationship with birds, because when the seed passes through the bird's alimentary canal, all the grit in the bird's gizzard sort of scrape off the protective coating of the seed. It then drops on the ground, and rowan berries that have been eaten by birds during the autumn will germinate in their first year, whereas normally if they drop on the ground quite close to the tree, perhaps when you get the gales, they'll get blown off. They can take 18 months to germinate, so it enhances the germination if the seeds have passed through a bird's gizzards, so to speak. So the seeds, here it is, it's now fully out on my fingernail. They're really, really hard and covered in a kind of protective coating, and that's the bit that's worn off when it goes through the bird. But the bird eats all the flesh of the berry, that's the deal. Then the bird goes off and roosts maybe in woodland or hedgerows, and that's the way the rowan gets itself around the British countryside. But a really attractive tree, and because it's rowan, because it's a ash tree that grows in a high place, it's High Ash Farm after all, I named my youngest son he'll be embarrassed to hear this, he's got the Christian name of Rowan, and it's now becoming quite a popular Christian name as well.
Yes, you were ahead of your time, weren't you?
Yes, for boys and girls. I've known girls to be called Rowan as well. It's quite an attractive name. So anyway, we look down the avenue. These were planted, so they've been here quite a while. In March 1984, the actual week Rowan was born, I bought myself these rowan trees and came and planted them. So a little bit of family history.
And they're a visual treat every year, aren't they?
They certainly are. And even, well, right through the year, one of the first trees, the one next to us, the leaves are already beginning to change colour. And like the ash trees that grow in the UK, the native ash, the rowan will be one of the first to lose its leaves as well, and that just leaves the orange berries, which say, come and get me, to the birds. So it's perfect bird fodder. So really, really good tree to have. So I'm really pleased to have them here, and great for wildlife as well. No, so any berries that don't get eaten, if they drop on the ground, I leave the edges of the field unmown now, and we've got a very high population of small mammals, and it's their first treat as well after the long dry summer. The berries obviously got a lot of moisture in them, so it's an all-round tree, and I'm just thrilled to have it here.
Well, it's blowing a gale this morning, isn't it?
Well, yes, we like a bit of fresh air in the autumn. It just makes you feel good. Clear blue sky almost, just a few clouds scudding across the top of us. Oh, just makes you glad to be alive.
Chris has just let Rat out of the car and he's stretching his legs. He wasn't allowed out last time because with the Rowans there was a horse nearby.
There was, and he's besotted with horses, but not in a nice way. It's warfare, and he's lucky he's had so many close escapes, because some of the horses take umbrage to his barking behaviour around their hooves, and the tail in particular. He'll try and jump up and grab horse's tail. That's not advisable, so he's gone well past his 9 lives. Anyway, he's with us here on this particular piece because we're fairly well out in High Ash Farm, and this morning, because I mentioned that summer seems to have almost disappeared into autumn already, and so a lot of the topics that we'd choose when we're well into autumn are available now, and I'm very aware how quickly the seasons pass from one to the other, so we kind of have to put skates on sometimes.
It's gone haywire a bit, isn't it?
It certainly has. So we've got pollen and nectar field right behind us. The last flower display there, lots of bird's foot trefoils still in flower low down. I'm still keeping my eye out for any late season clouded yellow butterflies that might find their way to High Ash, and I can see lots of six-spot burnet caterpillar cases there. Pupating.
Oh yes, the white.
Yes,
the white cases.
We have the sun behind us this morning, and so that shows out really well. We covered those about 2 weeks ago. Some more over there.
And are they white poppies out there?
No, that will be not giant hogweed. That's standard hogweed, and it's in flower very late. And later on, we've got a question on that particular plant because we covered it a week or two ago, and that's absolutely glorious. It's almost luminous, isn't it?
Well, it's standing out by itself in the middle of acres of other stuff.
And there's some there along an old hedgerow from years ago that's now finished flowering, and it's got those big flat head of seed heads there, and the seeds will be dropping off those any day in the winds that we're having here at the moment. But for this particular spot, we need to turn round. Unfortunately, we're going to look into the sun, almost dazzled, because the sun's still quite low. It's early morning, and
well, we just had red, didn't we? And now we've got blue.
We've got, well, they're actually black with a blue hue on them. if that's a bit of a tongue twister. And all along this hedge, and this used to be a nightmare hedge for me to cut by hand in my youth, but I had to come here and just trim this about every 3rd year, and it's blackthorn. Prunus spinosa, and it's a spinosa bit that's the alarming bit. It means the spiny plum. So blackthorn, a British native, and it's fiercely covered with prickles all over. And because we had that warm spring and the dry spring as well, pollination, when the blackthorn blossom was out, we did come and admire it on an earlier podcast, sort of end of March, early April time. It was in full flower, and pollination was really, really successful back then. There was a couple of weeks of warm, dry, sunny weather. In fact, the beginning of our spring drought almost back then. And because of that, I don't think I've ever seen such a crop of sloes. So this time of the year it's obviously finished flowering, and there's a lot of growth on the hedge. I'm going to be quite careful how I get hold of the little stems here, because each stem has little spurs off it, and where those leaves are, that's actually a thorn, and they're actually quite sharp. They're like little needles, and once you get into the bush, it's actually armed to the gunnels. You can see up there, look, all over, little needle sharp thorn-like structures.
Look at all these sloes. There's hundreds of them, and they're
Yes.
all quite bunched towards
Yes,
where the
they're all
branch is.
Yeah, all about a centimetre in diameter, about just coming up to half an inch. And I said they're black, you said they're blue, because they're covered at this time of the year, just as they become ripe, which these are, in this blue hue over them. Look, if I just run my finger over the top of one, you can see it's jet black underneath.
Goes more grape colour then,
Yes,
doesn't
it does. I'll pull it off, and normally these can stay on the bush well into autumn and into winter. And if I did bite into it, it's very acidic. It kind of makes your teeth go on edge, is the polite way of putting it. But if I put my fingernail in and then pull it in half, there's some green pulp inside.
That's green gauge green now.
It does look like that, doesn't it? And then there's a very large single seed, which I'm just peeling the flesh off with my thumbnails. Here it is. It's quite a large seed. It's obviously a member of the prunus family, the plum family. Same relation as our Victoria plums and Tsar plums, and lots of new varieties of plums. Plum production in the UK plummeted in recent decades, and it is now beginning to come back up again with some of the new varieties which we can grow here in the UK. So here's the seed. And that's another one of those seeds which later on in the year, once the plum, I call them berries, they're actually called drupes, is what I was called at school by my head teacher. But I think that was spelt slightly differently. Skinner, you're a drip. And so these are called drupes because the seed is encased in flesh over the top here, and then the actual seed is inside this stone. And so it passes again through birds' alimentary canal. The grit that birds, because the birds don't have teeth, the grit inside rubs off some of this shell, and it can then germinate the seed inside the stone. So that's the difference, why it's called a drupe and not a berry. So there they are, very bright and very beautiful. Where the wind's blown and a neighbouring twig has touched some of the drupes, the berries in there.
It's got rid of the blush.
It's got rid of that blue hue, I called it. So fantastic plant. The only problem with blackthorn, because it's a brilliant livestock hedge covered in all these thorns. Horses will eat hawthorn, but they tend to avoid nibbling the blackthorn because of the prickles. So it grows out. It self-seeds as well because of all the drupes, the berries that drop on the ground. So it's also a problem, although the actual
swallows flying into one of the large barns at High Ash Farm, feeding their young. This is one of the big conservation success stories I know you're very proud of.
just brings a huge delight. 4 youngsters just waiting for mum and dad.
The podcast aims to bring you sights and sounds like this every week, and we're very thankful of your support. So any donations or subscriptions are very welcome indeed.
All we need is a little bit of extra help. It just keeps it going from week to week.
Monthly or one-off subscriptions, whatever the size, and the website highashfarm.com/podcast.
6 youngsters right above our head, all with their gates wide open. Hedge here is the other side of the ditch. It's not managed to cross the ditch, but I've done a newly planted hedge behind us which stretches away across the field, and already the blackthorn is spreading itself by suckers, so it's got more than one way of spreading itself. So if we just walk, we'll have a quick look here and I'll show you what blackthorn's capable of. It doesn't stay where you put it. Here, look, all the way down the side.
Oh,
These are called suckers.
Little baby blackthorn.
Yes, And so the hedge, instead of being 4 foot wide, this particular one, which is only about 10 years old, is about 15 feet wide.
So left to its own devices over years and years, it would eventually just become a thicket.
It absolutely does, but that's partly of its beauty. If you're into conservation, these thickets form some of the best nesting material for our farmland birds. Some birds, actually, it doesn't help too much at all, but they nest in the understory. Things like grey partridge will nest on the ground, one of our game birds. Yellowhammers will nest on the ground, but out in the density, a whole variety of birds like bullfinches, greenfinches, goldfinches will nest in the thicket in there. It's a lovely little habitat in there.
Looks like there's some creatures maybe have gone in here, some bigger.
It's full of deer tracks and things scurry through, and of course the sloes that aren't eaten by the birds and get carried away, they'll drop on the understory, and again it's that wonderful sort of bonanza of food that happens in late autumn. They stay on till the leaves are all gone off the sloe, and then off the blackthorn bush I should say, and then they show up much more. As time goes on, the acidity in the sloe itself starts to break down, and you get sugars forming in there, and that's the time of the year, right into November and December, when the thrush species, when they've polished off all my Rowan berries, they then come and eat this final sort of bonanza of the berry crop, which is the sloes. So there we are. Now, I know from previous experience when I've talked about sloes before, there's always been a lot of interest because I had a granny. She's long since departed this mortal world. Her name was Rose Skinner, and she had a fantastic recipe for sloe gin. And so along beside me I've actually brought, and it says at the top, my granny's sloe gin recipe, and I wrote it down from her little recipe book in 1996. And it says drink sparingly. That was her recommendation.
Well, we don't have to follow that, do we?
No. So it's a very simple recipe. Per bottle of gin, ideally 40% alcohol and good quality. Each bottle of neat gin makes 2 bottles of sloe gin. So that makes you smart to start with. So first of all, you've got to pick some clean, sound, dry sloes. Half fill a clean, clear glass bottle with good gin. Add 8 ounces of caster sugar. That's 4 ounces into each of your half bottles, because you're going to end up with 2. Then just a half a teaspoon of almond essence as well. That's for the 2 bottles, so it's just a quarter of a teaspoon per half bottle of almond essence. Then add pricked sloes to fill the bottle.
So what do you do? So you put a fork in the sloes?
I used to, but because my granny didn't have the luxuries of a freezer, I found a better way of doing it. So when I've picked the sloes, which are coming up to this time of the year, so certainly around mid-August, end of August in this particular year, I gather lots of them, enough to fill half a demijohn, and then I actually freeze them on a flat tray for about 24 hours. And because they freeze quite quickly, the water inside the sloe expands and actually cracks the skin of the sloe, which is exactly the same as that laborious process of having to prick thousands of sloes. I just love the sloe gin. And so add the pricked sloes to fill the bottle. I use a kitchen fork, as is what I used to do. So I managed to prick 2 sloes with each one.
But you use your freezer.
Yes. Ensure all the sloes are covered in gin. Shake gently, weakly, until the sugar is dissolved. Then wait a minimum of 8 weeks before drinking. For super clear sloe gin, filter through a double muslin. So that's very, very simple. So I make lots of it, sort of getting on for 2 litres, I suppose, in total. But I then put it into tiny little bottles with a high ash label on it, and if I'm giving somebody a Christmas gift, they have one of these little 30 centilitre clear glass bottles, and it's quite something as well when you've done it yourself. There's something special. Instead of trawling all around the shop, there's something rather rather special late in the year. You drink it as you do a liqueur, so you don't go having a wine glass full, you have it in a little tiny sherry glass. In fact, my granny called it a dosset, which is a tiny little amount that you would drink, and you drink it and it's really warming. It's something about drinking that, and you've had the anticipation, the making it, and it's partly that which makes it special as well, all the work that you've put into it. It's something rather special, and one of those things we do out in the countryside.
Sloe gin.
Yeah.
So you'll need some sugar, some almond essence,
Yes.
and the sloes.
And the sloes, and then a bit of patience, and that comes into it.
Oh, and some gin.
The important bit.
Navy
yes.
strength.
Yes, good. And if it's around 40%, that improves the colour of the gin, believe it or not. So if you're losing very low strength alcohol, gin in particular, it would be something about 30%. But if you can get to 40%, that gives you that lovely deep red rich colour, which is absolutely superb. It almost doesn't pour out of the little glass that you're drinking out of. It's basically a liqueur because of the sugar content, but it's still 20-25% alcohol, so drink it standing up, you know, when you've had enough then.
Well, the gin is slow, but it goes quick.
Exactly that. One of my favourite recipes, and hope you enjoy it if you manage to pick some.
Brilliant sunshine, still blowing a hoolie though, and we've come to the other side of the farm where I guess this used to be used as what, a sugar beet pad here?
Yes, before that it was a series of old clay block barns which became quite dangerous, full of huge beams up in the apex of the roofs, and I can remember each end of each of the clay block barns there was an owl hole right through my childhood, and eventually they started to sort of fall in on themselves. They were quite vast actually, so there's a concrete area here which we then later used as a sugar beet pad, and obviously I've stopped growing sugar beets at this time of the year, and at any time of the year all the arable production has really ceased, but I've left the wall all the way round the back, and that was in flint. Eventually that cascaded down as well, and so I've put a very smart sleeper wall up, quite extensive.
Great big bits of timber like railway sleepers.
Yes, they're grade 1 railway sleepers all the way around. There's perhaps 150 of them. And so something, I haven't warned you we were going to do this, but each year I get you up close to a hornet's nest once a year, but we're a little bit early for the hornets. But we're not too early for their smaller cousins, wasps.
I think I know where we're going here, and there are a few flying about
Yes.
here, going in and out between the sleepers.
Yes, and so they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sleepers down. In between each sleeper there's a bit of a gap, and obviously a queen wasp went in there this spring, and it's now quite a thriving nest, and it won't be disturbed or destroyed whatsoever, because we all have started to learn that wasps are excellent pollinators. Now they are a bit spikish. I think it was Kate in, I think it was Midsummer Night's Dream, said, if I be waspish, then beware my sting. I think that was the phrase that was used.
Well, I get lots of conversations at this time of the year with people, and it's been early this year, lots of wasps. They do seem to bother people.
Yes.
Although it's often when people are outside having a drink or having some food maybe,
Yes, yeah.
and enjoying beer gardens and what have you.
That's the problem.
And they say, well, what is the point of these wasps? They are so aggressive.
Yes, they're also excellent pollinators, and we need them. They also control lots of the sort of insects that might cause a problem, things like aphids. They'll eat those. Now, wasps at this time of the year are kind of carnivorous, so they're hunting for insects or any source of protein. That's where your outside barbecue comes in. So if you're grilling sausages and burgers and something like that outside, then that's fodder manna from heaven for them, if you like.
Oh, well, I think maybe people don't realise that, because it's well known that sugar attracts them,
Yes.
but also anything rich in protein.
Yes, that's the first food source. This is where the dilemma happens. And so they're after that. They're actually, at the end of the day, not really interested in you. But if you have a wasp coming close to your barbecue or close to you, and you're eating your hot dog or something, then you start flapping your arms around, and that means that you're alarmed. That looks like you're a predator attacking them, and so they're going to take retaliatory action, which they're entitled to do. Now, the other problem is wasps have a sweet tooth. Well, they don't actually have teeth, but they are very addicted to anything sugary, or with sugar in, or with alcohol in, which has a lot of sugar in it, obviously. And so they're attracted to beer, to drinks, to marmalade, jam, anything like that, because they can eat that. What they're actually doing when they're looking for protein is taking the prey that they catch back to the nest to feed the grubs. They can't eat this protein themselves, the adult wasps, which are going in and out beside us.
All the time.
I notice you're walking backwards slowly, Matthew.
We're only 6 foot odd way, aren't we?
Yes.
And they're not bothering us in the least.
No, they're not. So that's what happens. They're bringing the protein back to the nest to feed the grubs, and the grubs are in the nest. We owe wasps another huge favour. I think they taught us to make paper, because they chew wood up, mix it with saliva, and then make these I suppose it's one of the most beautiful natural structures in all of nature, is a wasp's nest. Tiered, beautifully delicate, very light, and amazingly intricate, with all the cells facing downwards. So there's a difference between wasps and bees. Bees are equipped with a sting, which has a little barb on the end. Now, so if a bee stings you, that's kind of fatal. So it's one of the last duties that bees have in their many and varied duties through their life.
Fatal for the bee.
It's fatal for the bee. They're like kamikaze pilots. If they sting you, the little barb stays in, so the bee then moves away and extracts that, and it's fatal for them. Now, a wasp is different. It's got a little hypodermic sting, just the same, but it doesn't have the barb on the end. So if a wasp gets up your trouser leg, and this happened to me last year, I stood on a wasp nest taking Rat for his evening walk. Without realising it, I stood there and just looking around the woodland for topics for a podcast, and I think I got 2 or 3 up my trouser leg, and I got absolutely peppered. And I started doing something terrible, which was flapping my arms around, hitting my legs, and of course I'd left the nest behind me, with the wasps rather angry that I'd stood on the nest hole, and they had a good go at me, and I admire them for that. They were protecting their territory, and they're absolutely entitled. They're part of the sort of natural ecosystem as we are, so they've got every right to defend them, and they're only tiny, like just over half an inch long, for goodness sake.
These are quite small ones, actually.
Yeah,
aren't they?
they're normal female workers. So
They'll get bigger as the season goes on,
as
I
the
think.
season goes on, they will start to rear the queen wasps. Now, all of those workers.
Now we've bopped down on our knees here. We can see a lot more.
You can see them coming in and out. So doing no harm here, doing loads of good. They're also visiting flowers, because they're after the nectar. Now, why does the adult wasp, which we're watching flying in and out, why do they have this split diet? It's because the little join between the thorax and the abdomen is not much thicker than a human hair. So the only way they can feed themselves is through the nectar and anything sweet. So that's why they're also after the sweet things on your barbecue. So the poor wasp.
So they have got an hourglass figure, haven't they?
They certainly have. It's tiny, that little joint. So they have to have liquid food which passes through, and they can't eat that carnivorous food which they're feeding to the grubs. Once the grubs have sealed over in their little cells, they then pupate in there, and later on in the year you'll have the queen wasps coming out, and those grubs then become carnivorous. But towards the end of the season, which is in September or in October. Occasionally into November, the wasp nests stay active. All of these workers will die and just leave the queens. The queens come out, they'll feast on carnivorous food, the queen wasps, and also on the ivy late on in the season, and that gives them the energy to have in their bloodstream so that they can hibernate as adults. But all the drone wasps, that's the male wasps, the worker wasps, which we can see going in and out, the whole lot die, and only the queens survive the winter, hibernate through the cold months, come out next spring, perhaps under tree bark or in an old log pile, which we're kneeling next to. Good place for them to hibernate. Garden sheds, even in houses sometimes.
This is a real home from home here for them. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, well, they're
between
protected at the farm.
Yeah.
I don't control them, and they're welcome here because it's all part of nature. Once you start to sort of interfere with individual parts and say, I don't want herons near my fish pond, I don't want stoats and weasels eating my pheasant poults, I don't want buzzards catching things on the farm, and I stand back and let nature do what nature does, and it's beginning to form a perfect balance here. And I have people walking around a farm almost in tears, seeing things that they perhaps haven't seen since their childhood, and that's the magic of nature. Whereas, you know, it's very easy to get the wasp destroying foam, and occasionally they can be a nuisance if they're right outside your door or something, but if you stand back and able to watch them and enjoy them and don't upset them, you know, the old motto is don't upset a hornet's nest, because they're very mild-mannered actually. That's their largest cousin, the largest member of the wasp family. They're very mild-mannered unless you disturb them, or you disturb a wasp's nest, because they can give a good account of themselves. He says with a smile.
As you found out.
As I found out. And they also got rat. So he was tearing off out of the wood, yelping and squealing. He got 2 or 3. They got in his coat and stung him. And did quite a good job on him, but
I thought he'd made himself scarce.
He's probably gone back. No, I'm not sure where he is now. He's either hiding up. He is. There we go. He's sensed danger, and he's put himself in the truck. Hello, rat, and he's looking rather anxious round in the footwell.
He doesn't forget.
No, he can smell them. Now, that's the thing. I wanted to take you out onto the farm, into the woodland, and find you old mouse holes or tree holes quite close to ground level, and every one I've found has been dug out by the badgers. So people say, what controls wasps? Well, predator number 1 is badgers. They love a good wasp nest. They dig down, impervious to all the stings. They will do it to hornets' nests as well. And they eat all the grubs in the nest, and again, that's manna from heaven for them. And I keep going round the farm, finding these huge holes with remnants of a wasp nest down in the bottom, perhaps 18 inches deep underground, and they've all been predated by the local badgers. I do have to smile.
A doughty badger might be able to dig this one out.
No, that's the whole thing. That's why I brought you here. I was so pleased to find a topic for this week, because I knew you were itching to do a piece on wasps.
Well, sometimes if you're eating outside, they'll buzz around your head, won't they? And actually, I think that's because maybe some remnants of food or drink
all
around.
Of those things, because they've got a very good sense of smell. They can detect that. And then the worst thing you can possibly do is flap your hands away. They're not really interested in you, to be honest. They're interested in the sweet things, as I mentioned. They have to have sweet things to be able to survive. That's the adult wasp. Or they're after the protein for the grubs. It's as simple as that. Once you understand what their needs and desires are, you can perhaps learn to tolerate them a little bit more than what most people do. I do. No, I admire them, although I got peppered up the leg. I'm glad it didn't go above knee level, but it did make me laugh afterwards, and I kind of, if I was wearing a hat, I'd tip my hat and say, well done, they got a human to run like an idiot out of the wood. And they're half an inch long. Look, come on, you've got to give them some respect, Matthew.
Well, we've been here 10 or 15 minutes and they've completely ignored us.
Exactly so. That's the trick of the trade.
We got some letters to look at?
We have. Come on.
We'll find somewhere out of the wind, I think.
Yep.
Down goes the back of the pickup. This is our office for the next 10 minutes or so as we've been looking at your emails. And just before we do that, Chris, we've got something really to look forward to in the autumn, haven't we? And we've been talking about the autumn coming early, but in fact towards the end of autumn, in October, we're going to be appearing on the stage, aren't we, at the Maddermarket Theatre in Norwich?
Yes, I'm really looking forward to that, to meeting all our podcast listeners. And what it is we're going to celebrate the year on High Ash Farm with some of the videos, some of the stories, some tall stories as well, probably. And it's just going to be great fun. I think it's at 2 o'clock. It's on October the 19th at the Maddermarket Theatre, and it runs for about 2 hours, maybe a little bit more if we get second wind. And it's just looking so forward to sharing the farming year, if you like, the wildlife year on the farm here.
So there'll be some lovely photographs, images on the big screen, and Chris answering any questions you may have, and a few anecdotes as well, because you've had one or two of those over the years.
Oh, I'm full of them. Tall stories.
Or full of it.
Just love sharing the natural world with our wonderful audience, and it's a super venue, almost in the middle of Norwich, nice and easy to find, and great fun as well. So do come along. We'll look forward to seeing you, and everybody will get a very warm welcome.
The Countryside Podcast, live on stage with Farmer Chris Skinner. It's the 19th of October. It's a Sunday afternoon at 2 o'clock. John Spink has sent an email. On your excellent podcast, Chris, I often hear you speak about the several types of deer on the farm, and also about walking through the woods and fields. Here in the Trinity Alps, a concern when out in the wild is picking up deer ticks. So tucking trousers into socks and wearing light-coloured clothing is the order of the day, so as to spot them if that happens. Deer ticks can carry Lyme disease, a nasty business. My dog gets an annual Lyme vaccination, not available for humans though anymore. Are there no such arachnids there, or is it not a concern?
Yeah, there certainly are. Deer populations increasing hugely in the UK, and particularly here in Norfolk with the introduced species, Chinese water deer thriving, muntjac thriving, as well as our native roe deer, which we have at the farm, and occasional red deer here. And they can all carry ticks. And Lyme disease, which they carried in the tick, is pretty nasty. A neighbouring farmer has Lyme disease, and he was ill for over a year with it, got very debilitated, and it is of course quite hard to diagnose, but he just remembers having a tick on his leg and flicking it off. I check rat regularly for ticks, but it is a problem, and it's becoming an increasing problem, particularly if you walk your dog out in the countryside. And that's why all my tracks here, I'm looking at one of the permissive walks now, are all mown with very short grass indeed, so you're not needing to brush up against tall grass where the tick can loiter.
And next it's Julian Lawrence, who emails from Halesworth. And in fact, Julian says that he's been to see you recently and had a look at the swallows. So he says thank you for that opportunity.
Yes, he just popped up in the farmyard, and when I knew who it was, popped him in the buildings and walked away and left him. And I think they were in there quite some time watching the feeding of the young.
Julian's got a question though on a different subject. With the lack of rainfall during this early summer, have you noticed, as we have, out and about in the natural meadows, the wildflowers seem low in numbers this year, or are just not showing as much against the grass? Or is it that they are not lasting as long due to the heat?
Well, you've almost answered the question yourself there. Two things have happened. The wildflowers, right from the word go, with a long, dry, warm spring that we had, drought-stricken, the flowers got on really quickly with their flowering and finished very quickly as well. Pollination's quite good, as we've been looking around some of the hedgerow trees as well as the wildflowers this morning. So that's one of the reasons, and they're Much shorter. We went to examine some of the bee orchids early on in the year when they first came into flower. They were only about 4 to 6 inches high. Normally they're double that high. So although the wildflowers were there, they were far less conspicuous than in a normal year, if you like.
They adapt though to the conditions.
Absolutely, they did. They didn't produce so much top growth, but they still flowered in profusion, but much less. They weren't so conspicuous as normal. So there we are. Very good observation. Thank you for that. That's a wonderful question.
And just finally, we head off to the Peak District and Chris Hanley. Hi Chris, hi Matthew. Back from a summer break in rural France, catching up on the podcast. Love the info you give on wildflower grasses and seeds. I learned so much. Enjoyed you talking about umbellifers. Thought you might like to see this photograph. I took it on the last day of July. It's wild angelica. Hope you managed to get out of the teasel maze and your rattle harvest was a good one.
The rattle harvest is all done and complete, and what a wonderful picture we've had sent through of the angelica. Another one of those umbellifers. Remember, we visited hogweed on the farm about 2 or 3 podcasts ago. Really a sculptural plant at this time of the year once the seeds are dropped off. The angelica here is in full flower, some slightly purple tinge, but that's almost a Christmas card picture, if you don't mind me saying, or a birthday card for somebody. Absolutely superb picture of angelica in full flower and just wonderful. So another umbellifer, and later on today I might be harvesting some of the hogweed seeds, which are now formed these dry seed heads on, absolutely laden with seeds this year. Quite a tall plant, over 1 metre tall, and if I can harvest some of the seed, I'm going to put some of that up for sale. It's an excellent attractant for moths and butterflies, particularly bees, and even the wasps that we visited a little while ago come and visit the hogweed flowers as well. So brilliant plant. So thank you very much for all your questions. Sorry you don't have time to listen to them all. We read them all, but sometimes we can't always respond because of limits of time.
And keep the emails coming. We'll answer more in future episodes. 19th of October for our live show, and hopefully we'll meet you then in Norwich at the Maddermarket Theatre. But next time it'll be the podcast, this time next week, and we're already getting ready for that.
Yes, we are. Got food topics already. You've got to be quick this year. The seasons are slipping through our fingers like grease lightning.
Talking of which, where is that dog?
Yeah, exactly. Where is he? Brad, where are you? Good boy, he's here.